Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Saturday night, Dabo Swinney, Clemson playing host to LSU in what's one of the more important college football games that we'll see all season long in terms of college football playoff implications. And I want to get into how Clemson gets this one done. And I want to say this right off the bat. Both of these football teams have an exceptional amount of talent. There's a reason I picked both of these teams to make the college football playoffs at the end of the year. I kind of firmly believe that the winner of this football game gets to their matchups more. Because you look at it from a Clemson standpoint and say that there are aspects of this football game where Clemson has the opportunity to really dominate. What are those matchups and how does Clemson dominate this football game at those matchups? That's the conversation that I want to get into. Before we do, and as always, the Clemson fans, appreciate you guys. It's been really fun talking this football team. The amount of support the Clemson fans have shown the boys has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Hey, how about a little bit of a vibe check down in the comment section? How the Clemson fans feeling about this one sitting here on a Thursday afternoon? Without further ado, let's get into it. And I want to start with this just broad before we get nitty gritty with some matchups. Look at these two projected depth charts. You look at Clemson, there's not a lot of color, right? There's not a lot of red. There's not a lot of blue. Then you look at LSU and say there's a lot of color. And what these colors mean are, hey, the red names are transfer portal additions. The blue names are true freshmen. LSU's got a lot of new faces on this football team. Clemson, they got a lot of players that have played a lot of football together over the last couple of years. To me, that matters. Continuity. It's a story that 10 years ago, you probably would have rolled your eyes at, and you probably would have been fair to do that, right? There was transfer portal didn't really exist. You didn't see a ton of true freshmen play right away. And so continuity 10 years ago wasn't really a talking point. Nowadays it is. It's part of the reason I love Clemson so much throughout 2025, but most importantly in this football game, when you talk about the team that you expect to play cleaner football early in the season, you probably lean to the team that has a bunch of players that have played a ton of seasons together versus an LSU team that I think is very, very talented. There's a lot of moving parts. If I wanted to play LSU, I'd want to play them early, before all these moving parts start gelling and hitting the ground running. I think that's a pretty clear advantage for Clemson, especially getting this football game at home too. You are at home with a lot more continuity, better chance to get off to a hot start. And if you do that, and get off to a hot start, get this crowd heavily involved, I think that's big for Clemson. Before we, an overarching take, before we even get nitty gritty, this is the storyline. We're going to talk about a couple of different matchups. To me, there's no more important matchup than can this defensive line dominate LSU up front? Because you look at Clemson's defensive line and say, all right, TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Will Helt sounds like he's a massive hit in the portal. DeMonte Capehart, Vic Burley, Stephylon Green. You're looking at Clemson's defensive line and say that's a ton of NFL talent. And more importantly, they're going up against an LSU offensive line that it's brand new. Whether guys who've been on this roster before, whether it's guys that were transfer portal additions, whether it's a potential true freshman in Carius Kern starting at right tackle, there's a lot of new faces on this LSU offensive line. How's it all going to come together? And you talk about a position that continuity, in my opinion, is very important. It's on the offensive line. Communicating pass protections, when to work up to the second level, the timing in terms of working up to the second level. It's a unit that it's one thing to have a lot of individual talent, but it's more important to have that unit gelling. You have a question mark if LSU can gel right away. Look, I think LSU's offensive line from a personnel standpoint is actually pretty dang good. Is it all going to come together week one on the road against the Clemson defensive line that might be one of the best fronts that we see in the country? That's the question here. Now, why is this such a big storyline? I think, number one, Garrett Nussmeier is not a quarterback that you feel really good about when things aren't perfect. I think Garrett Nussmeier is a very good quarterback, pocket passer that can make a lot of different throws. He's not necessarily the best at improvising. He's not necessarily the best at getting himself out of trouble, whether it's actually creating sacks or just getting a lot of disruption in the backfield. that can really impact a quarterback like Garrett Nussmeier a lot more than you probably see other quarterbacks in college football. And then the last storyline here is Tom Allen, the Tom Allen effect, you might say. And Tom Allen's a mastermind at giving a lot of different pictures for offensive linemen. When you have linebackers like Clemson does, Sammy Brown, Wade Woodaz, you can walk those suckers up to the line of scrimmage, give a lot of different looks, and really test the communication of this LSU offensive line as well. There's two ways to beat an offensive line. One, just having better football players, which Clemson might have. But number two, testing the communication and confusing an offensive line. That's certainly a storyline as well for this Clemson football team, especially when you're at home and it's really loud and it's hard to hear the calls that the center or quarterback might be making when it comes time to make some pass protection checks. That's where this game starts for Clemson. They have an opportunity to really dominate this football game along the lines of scrimmage. And if you do that and LSU struggles to run the football and they're dropping back and throwing the football a lot, that's a massive, massive favor for Clemson in this football game. And we can be honest about it. I think the LSU fans who are probably listening to this would agree. We haven't heard the best reports from this LSU offensive line during fall camp. If Clemson not just can win, but can they dominate up front, that's how Clemson wins this football game. Now, here's the other storyline on defense. You have to limit the explosive plays. This is an LSU offense that is full of difference makers and full of speed. I mean, you look at Barron Brown, he was a 10-7 guy in the 100-meter dash. You look at Aaron Anderson, he was a 10-7 guy in the 100-meter dash. You look at Chris Hilton, burners working vertically. You look at Nick Anderson, one of the better deep ball threats that you see in the country at the wide receiver position. The reason I want to talk about this is I would be surprised if LSU can string together a lot of 12-plus play drives where they go 80 yards and score a touchdown, without taking a penalty, without taking a drive-killing sack. That's just something that I don't see LSU doing a ton in this football game. So what's really dang important is that you can't give LSU anything free. Now, it's easier said than done because LSU's got some legitimate difference makers at the wide receiver position. If you can limit the amount of 20-plus yard plays, the amount of chunk plays that LSU can find and make them go earn those points driving the football field, that's another big storyline for Clemson on defense. And that might be the biggest question mark you have for Clemson is the safety position in general, right? Khalil Barnes being healthy, huge storyline. But then you also have a new safety on the other side, whether that be Ricardo Jones, whether that be Ronan Hannafin. There is some inexperience at the safety position for Clemson. These safeties are going to have to be really dang good. And if they are, and you don't give up a lot of explosive plays, it's going to be hard, in my opinion, for LSU to score a bunch of points. Going to the offensive side of the football, this is, in my opinion, the ultimate chess piece between Garrett Riley and defensive coordinator for LSU, Blake Baker. How do we manipulate and deal with Harold Perkins? Right, Harold Perkins is going to play the star position for LSU, which is essentially like that linebacker, defensive back hybrid, but they want to get Harold Perkins involved in the pass rush too. That's probably what he does best. And Clemson has the opportunity to really spread LSU out. And if I'm Garrett Riley, that's what I'm doing. I got 4 or 5 wide receivers that I want to get on the football field. TJ Moore, Brian Wesco, Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Tristan Smith. This is the deepest wide receiver room we've seen Clemson have in a very long time. I wonder if Garrett Riley goes back to his bag that he had at TCU. Said, hey, we're going to spread you out. We're going to force Harold Perkins not to be around the tackle box, not to be around the line of scrimmage. We're going to put him out on the boundary because we're going 4 wide receiver sets. What you do there is you kind of take away Harold Perkins' best asset as a defender, and that's rushing the passer and being around the football. If you can force Harold Perkins into situations where his fingerprint is not going to be all over this football game, it's a big storyline. I don't think LSU is going to take Harold Perkins off the football field, but if they're going to play him at that star position and Clemson goes 4 wide receiver sets, it's going to be hard for Harold Perkins to have the impact that he wants to have as a pass rusher. How well can Garrett Riley use different personnel and formations to probably limit, is the best way to say, Harold Perkins' impact on this football game? 2-3 years ago, Clemson didn't have this ability because they didn't have that many good wide receivers and they wanted to play their tight ends. 2025, that's a massive asset for Clemson. They got 5 wide receivers that I don't even, regardless of Harold Perkins even playing, I think you'd see Clemson lean into some 4 wide receiver sets because these wide receivers are too good not to have on the football field. Cade in the run game is probably the last thing I want to talk about on offense. I think this is probably the biggest question mark for Clemson on offense is how well can we run the football? We got question marks at the running back position. We think that LSU's done a really good job in the transfer portal on the defensive line. You want to, and this has been Clemson's bugaboo last year. When they play teams like LSU, teams that are college football playoff caliber, the run game was not something Clemson could lean on. You feel like you got to lean on it somehow in 2025, especially in these kind of football games. Now, Cade in the run game, you're not going to run this kid every single week. When you're playing a team like Wake Forest, you don't want Cade taking 10 or 15 hits again. You don't need to run Cade to beat a team like Wake Forest. Well, against LSU week 1 here, I think you're going to need him. Can you scheme up a couple of ways you can get Cade involved in the run game to help this Clemson football team get that run game going against LSU? That feels like a big storyline as well. The X factors to me, I think number 1, it's Khalil Barnes. He's going to have to be great at safety, especially having another safety that's going to be next to him that's going to be inexperienced. Khalil Barnes not only has to be really good himself, but kind of has to be the captain of the back end of this Clemson defense. If you get Khalil Barnes playing his best football, limiting the explosive plays that LSU can find, it's hard for me to see Clemson not winning this football game. This is kind of how you wrap this up. These are 2 really good football teams. Clemson has in my opinion, very clear advantage in certain areas. Can they really lean into those advantages and dominate this game along the lines of scrimmage, specifically with that defensive line? That's what it comes down to. I love this game being at home for Clemson. Love it because it's going to be loud. It's going to be hard for that offensive line to communicate. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I think we're going to run this episode back from an LSU perspective too and talk about what LSU needs to do to win this football game as well. Appreciate you guys. We're going to talk to y'all later.